Dr. Lamb, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm good. Dr. Brown asked me to be part of the dissertation panel at the summit.
Okay.
But it doesn't start till 2:30. What time do you think will be done on that Sunday for class?
2.
Okay. How long does it take to get from Charlotte to Gardner Webb?
Hour on Sunday.
Okay.
You'll have to leave a little early if I don't finish early.
I wonder if I could.
I beg your pardon?
I wonder if I could call in on my way.
Yeah, you can always call in on, on Zoom.
Okay. I'll go around and see what she wants me to do.
I mean, we'll be through by 2, and so
Okay.
We might shoot for a few minutes. But yeah, it'll take at least, well, Sunday, as long as it's not a ball game Sunday, you can make it back in hour, and well, if you go out the back way there, hit 485 and come around, you make it an hour and 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, so
good.
That won't be bad. Are you on the job yet?
Yeah, I started last week. I'm actually visiting family this week, so I'm not there this week, but I worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of last week. So it's good so far.
Good so far.
3 days in, I guess, but we'll see.
Where are you visiting family?
In the middle of nowhere, Ohio right now. We go to Tennessee, then we go to Ohio, and then we go to New York. So
Tennessee, Ohio, and New York. Now, who's from Tennessee? Not you.
No, my husband's mom is in Tennessee.
Oh.
Ohio, and then my mom is in New York.
Your mom's in New York, and who's in Ohio?
My husband's dad.
Oh, okay.
But they live in like farmland in the middle of nowhere. So right now I drove into town to sit at a Panera because they don't have internet, they don't have air condition, so we went shopping today at the Amish store. So that's my life for a couple of days.
Yeah. It's good for you, though. It's good for your humility.
Oh, 100%.
It's good.
We laugh about it. First world problems,
Mm-hmm. My next door neighbor, she's originally from Minster, Ohio, which I think is roughly equivalent to what you're talking about. No.
I think a lot of Ohio is really.
Yeah, really and truly, I mean, I think that only rednecks are found in the South or kind of places like that, but there's a lot of places like that in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And then their accent's not nearly as fun as people from the South. I mean, that's, you did get that benefit from being in the South, but where's your husband's mother in Tennessee?
Outside of Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
So that, that's different. We were partying in Nashville Saturday night, and now we're, going shopping at the Amish farm today. So
yeah,
full circle.
Yeah, that's kind of the alpha and the omega. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, my wife's bunch is from her mother's bunch was from just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay, yeah, we drive through Knoxville.
Yeah, about 30 minutes south, go toward the airport, and then you kind of turn left back toward North Carolina and go toward the Smoky Mountain National Park and the parkway there. They
Yep.
live up against the parkway back down in there and way back off the road. You have to drive. I mean, they're fairly educated people. And but you know what's amazing to me is he's actually a pipe fitter in the union, welder pipe fitter. And
Okay.
Knoxville, a lot of people from that area worked in Chicago, but there was Alcoa had a lot of business holdings, I guess, in Chicago. So everybody in that part of the world worked at Alcoa or some related business to Alcoa Aluminum. But they're all union people.
Yep.
Which is unusual for the South, especially in rural areas. But
I know when we come up to visit, we do this trip, we always see some of our friends in Columbus and then some of our friends in New York, and they're all teachers, and that's all they ever talk about is union stuff.
yeah,
Amazing to them that we don't have a union.
yeah. Well, you know, I need to email her and see how she's doing. I had a student in Jacksonville, North Carolina, military dependent, and her husband, he got deployed to Hickam on the Big Island in Hawaii.
Oh,
And she went over there. They're unionized. And what an ordeal we went through with her. They filed a grievance over her doing her evidence portfolio that they should be paid if they participated in her PLC or did any work, that was extra duty, they should be doing extra pay for that. And then when she got through with her add-on licensure, they told her that she couldn't be employed as an AP in Hawaii. And she said, why not? I have my licensure. She did reciprocal for her. They said, well, here we require that the union requires that you have a master's in school administration, not just add-on licensure. And said that really weeds down the population. And so she came back. She was the first student I had, and that's how we got started on this thing about coming back and doing, after you do your add-on for people who have masters in other areas, to do the 2 courses and get another master's in leadership, in school administration. So we've got a lot doing that now that have masters in some unrelated field. And so we're averaging about 10 a semester coming back now.
it's crazy how one thing can keep you locked out of a position.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was talking to Janet, I guess it was weekend before last. Janet just retired as the superintendent in the county that way. One county over from where I am here at Gardner Webb. She's my first cousin by marriage. And but her and my wife are like sisters. They've been there's about a 4 or 5 years age difference, but you wouldn't know it. They're like sisters. But anyway, she was talking about that. I said, well, who's going to replace you? She's becoming the town manager in the town there in Forest City. And I said, well, who's going to replace you? She said, well, there's 2 candidates. They're going to look internal only because of the lateness of the date. They won't have somebody in place by the time school starts. And so they're going to do internal only. And said, one has his doctorate and one doesn't. And said, part of the board is trying to write the job description for superintendent as a required doctorate just to exclude him from getting the job. And I thought, well, you know, there's a better reason than that why he should never be superintendent. But You know, they can't say that. He
Right.
was he was the high school principal that cheated. And they quietly moved him out and did this and that and the other. But he has a lot of supporters in the county. But, you know, the school board can't come out and say, you know, we had to remove him as a high school principal because he was blatantly cheating on state testing. They can't say that. So what they're going to do is they're going to keep him out by writing it in that he must have his doctorate and he doesn't have it. But, you know, that's the reason why he can't be superintendent is.
Oh, you can always tell who they're trying to either allow in or lock out by the way they write a job description.
Oh, yeah. But you got to be smarter than they were in Avery County back in the 80s. I never will forget that. They got sued and lost. They took the fellow they wanted for a job and took his resume and posted the job announcement off of his resume. And they put one thing on there that was only on his resume that didn't make any sense for the job. And they were able to prove that they had written the description off of his resume for the new vocational director, what would now be CTE director. They got sued. They had to pay a bunch of money. Can't be that blatant.
Yeah.
But you
A little
can.
bit discretionary.
Yeah, you can say you have to have a doctorate. You can do that. So that's what they're going to do to try to. She said they're going to try to do that to keep him out. But you know the sad part is there's some people on the board who want him because they like the idea that he's willing to do whatever it takes to get scores.
Yep.
You'd think that would be soundly condemned, but everybody would say, you know, but no. There's action on the board. You know, we don't care how we get them. We don't care if kids actually have learned anything. We don't care if what. We just, you know, we want the state off our back about the test scores, and we don't care how we get them.
Yep.
I mean, he is one of them by any means necessary guys. He's proven that.
More and more.
Well, I was looking for a letter here. I copied a response, and that's how I was going to open the class tonight. Let me see if I can get where I am. All right, there we go. If I can find this. Let me go to my disk here.
Knock it out of the park.
I guess I saved it on the hard drive of my laptop, and I didn't transfer it over. Let me do that right quick while we're still. Who we got? We got April and Angela and Karen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're still waiting on a couple. Let's see here. Crank this one up. But let me see if I can find this file right quick. while I'm doing that, what I need to do all right, so we've got Laura, Karen, April, and Jennifer who have done We Are Normal too. Laura is in China. Yeah, that's right. All right. I'm opening up this document right now. 2 more minutes. Right. All right. So before we start the case study tonight, welcome everybody. I hope everybody's had a good week. I see it's 7:02. It's time to get started. So you know the activities that we have this summer. We'll get to those in just a minute. I want to share this with you. So I had a student who did activity 5 on student discipline. Now we talked about reporting last Sunday, the disciplinary data manual. You have to report all incidents. Everything that has to be reported has to go in PowerSchool. We talked about all of that. And the problem with PBIS is people use it to cheat. That cheating has become prevalent in our business. We generally know who they are and when they do it. And so this was a student response in one of my regular add-on classes that came in this week. The interview with the principal stated that discipline was one of the hardest parts of her job. Since the school has been using PBIS for the last years, discipline data has been tracked in PowerSchool and other documents to be able to retrieve the data necessary to submit PBIS. For her, it was difficult to determine when to enter the information in the disciplinary incident. If an event was listed in the handbook that obviously demanded action, she would handle the incident document. If it was simply the teacher needed a break from a repetitive nonviolent behavior from a student, she mostly began handling that without entering into PowerSchool. She was worried that she was entering more into PowerSchool than other principals in other larger schools. However, I put the however in. There was an increase in incident that required the SRO in 1819. Do you think that there's a correlation between those two things? If you understand antecedent behaviors. We talked about antecedent behaviors, the little things that become the big things. So right here, out of the mouth of babes, the student said the principal stopped entering the small stuff into PowerSchool, basically quit dealing with it because she was worried about the numbers being too large. But then the next sentence, there was an increase in incident that required the SRO, which would be acts of crime and violence. Do you think the two are related? If you understand, or you don't have to agree with, but if you understand the theory of antecedent behaviors, yeah. Was that to be expected?
Well, yeah, because if you stop being consistent and applying consequences to the little things, they add up and become big things
That
because
is correct.
there's no boundaries. We know children thrive on boundaries, and when they don't have them, a lot of times they'll wreak havoc until they get some kind of boundary, or they'll just keep pushing the limit until they know what the limit is. And if your limit is these really highly violent incidences, then that's
Threshold, you know, exactly, Kelly. It's about threshold. Now, I'm betting that she doesn't know why their acts of crime and violence went up, that the SRO had to be involved in.
Well, if you ignore the smaller behaviors, you also don't understand why the kids are behaving the way they are. And so then, I mean, you could put an intervention in that could stop a small behavior, but if you let it domino effect, you're going to end up with those larger behaviors.
Of course you will. Did we not go over the antecedent behavior PowerPoint last week? I did the keynote at the 2011 conference. I think I'd actually already retired, but let's see. And this was from 2011. So let me see. I have this in our materials folder. Let's see. It's kicked me out. Let me go back in. Yeah, it's kicking me out. Let me go back. And so remember, this is 2011, and what my argument was from having done all this data analysis, both for DPI and for Charlotte-Mecklenburg where I was working, we identified antecedent behaviors, little things that become the big things if you don't deal with them. And basically we were projecting for the next 10 years what the big things would be, that areas that we needed to make particularly we needed to make a priority in terms of making sure that we stop the little things like do-rags and gang symbols. I know we talked about that with Karen last week, you know, that if you didn't do the little things, that the big things would eat you up. And so in that antecedent behaviors, here are the 4 things that I predicted were going to be the problems. If you didn't deal with these smaller things, that you'd get bigger things, that gang activity leads to drugs and weapons, sexting leads to sexual offenses, cyberbullying leads to serious assaults and also suicides, sexual harassment, rape, sexual offense, sexual assault. It's the little things that become the big things. And so this document, I couldn't have written this myself. I'm not smart enough. Y'all have already figured that out. That when she decided that our numbers look bad, we're reporting too much, instead of going out and working to get those numbers down by doing the things you know you need to do, supervise better and deal with them, we just won't report them. We won't deal with them. And now the outgrowth of that, or the chickens that have come home to roost, or whatever metaphor you want to use, is that now there's been an increase in violent incidents that require the SRO, acts of crime and violence. That's how it works in this business. I can't make this up, folks. I'm not smart enough, but that's how it works in this business. If you let the little things slide, they'll become big things. And so when we get to that one, but I thought, how apropos that the principal just decided, I don't like the way the numbers look, so I'll just manipulate the numbers. But as you know, if you got more instances where the school resource officer is involved, your building, your children, and the people that work for you are not as safe. They're not as safe. So how is that a good thing that you've manipulated the number? That's a bad thing. But there are people in our business, a lot of good people, good church-going people, who don't think anything of manipulating the number because they're allowed to. And so that's why yesterday I went into a CNI class here on campus. Dr. Bull's teaching the CNI class, and they're putting together, they're building a PLT, where they're putting together professional learning teams, and they're doing all this work. The genesis of this is, what the outcome is they want to take people who have skill and ability and have them lead professional learning teams, not based on seniority, but on expertise. It's based on talent, not on time. That a lot of young people have a lot of technical skill, but they sit and take a secondary role and don't say anything because they're the junior member of the firm, and what they're trying to do is develop a process where people who have skill lead the teams, and especially younger people with skill and technology. Now, as I pointed out to them, the fallacy in that thinking is, I asked the question, what's the least reliable form of data? And the answer, of course, is self-report. Because we know people will fudge the data if they can. People people lack self-awareness. People, they intentionally, if you allow people to self-report, I don't have a lot of faith in that data. And I said, the heart of this is you're going to have to do some sign before you just assume that everybody young can use technology. You better do some sort of skill assessment, because there's one thing that young people won't do that old people like me will do. I'll read the manual. And a lot of young people figure, say, it's intuitive, I'll figure it out. Not always, especially not something as difficult as PowerSchool. The administrative portal, it is not menu driven for a reason, to keep people from going in and hacking around in that know what they're doing. And so you won't get into PowerSchool and use it effectively until you read the manual and get trained. It's the same thing with a lot of technologies that we use in school. So to assume that just simply because of somebody's birth date that they know how to use technology is not really sound thinking. And you can't depend on them to tell you whether they can or they can't, because self-report's not really reliable either. And so, I'm still surprised every time I pass a mirror, there's an old man standing there. I really am. I'm just shocked. I'm like, who let this old man in? We're self-delusional. I told you the story. It's absolutely the truth. I am not a Facebook person. I am on Facebook. I've got an account on Facebook so that Santa Claus pictures can be shared when I do Santa Claus. But other than that, I do not participate. My wife did that account. I don't have one. But from time to time, stuff pops up on my phone from Facebook because I have an account. I don't respond normally. I've responded, I think, one time. And the one time I responded was one of my fraternity brothers posted a picture of himself standing in a building in Raleigh. And you could see the street address. And his question was, where am I? And I just could not resist. I said, well, from that street address, you're standing in front of where our old fraternity house used. I said, from the street address, that's the address where our old fraternity house is. And why is your father standing in front of it? Because we look a lot different 40 years later than we used to. But in our minds, we don't. And that's part of the self. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. That's how I explain the self-delusion and the lack of self-awareness when it comes to self-report. We believe it down deep. And see, that principal believes down deep that those infractions don't really matter. She believes down deep that she's a good person and she's doing the right thing but not reporting. She believes that. Is not intentionally doing something deceptive for. She doesn't believe she's doing anything bad. That the number of SRO required incidents went up. She'll never put the two together because she doesn't see the harm in what she's doing. She thinks it's a good thing what she's doing. And you're never going to convince her otherwise. And so what it boils down to is you got to do the right thing all the time. You need people that aren't just yes people around you as a leader who will point out it's probably not the good thing to do. If the manual says clearly not to, that's a violation of state law to do it. You'll lose your license if you get caught, for no other reason than that. But the ethical piece, this is, and you're making our school less safe by doing this. So I thought that was a good example of the point that I've tried to make with disciplinary data reporting and when y'all do that activity. All right, so let's talk about the case at hand. And so what I have here, let's see. So who's going to start us off here as we go through this? We are normal too. So Laura's in China. Who's with us? April's with us. April, can you hear us? April is muted. Let me unmute April. April, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can't hear you now. Hold on. Just hold on 1 second. Let me. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can't hear you very well. I'm at a baseball game, at a baseball tournament, so I'm trying to walk away and figure out technology.
All right.
Okay, so can I do the overview and then pass it on to Karen?
Sure.
All right. I'm trying to see if I can read this. I got old eyeballs. All right. So Jimmy and Willie were best friends, but then they were seen kissing in the library. Jimmy and Willie come out as gay and inform the principal they're going to go to prom together, and the community gets very outraged. The school principal has received all kinds of communication, and the parents are forming groups and signing petitions, and they already have a number of people on their petitions. They don't want the two boys to attend prom together. So principal doesn't want to deal with the negative PR. He meets with the boys and the families together and says, just hold off a little while till after graduation so she doesn't have to deal with it. And they take offense to it and say that's a veiled threat. I don't know about that, though. It sounds pretty straightforward to me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Jimmy and Willie want to organize events, and they say they're going to raise awareness and help promote fairness and understanding. And the principal says, again, you got to wait till, end of school's almost over. Let's not start this now. So they each have a different set of agendas. And that's the gist of it. Are you guys there?
Yes.
Okay.
So the takeaway is that in 1969, which we've talked about this in class, students have constitutional rights, but disruptive conduct is not protected. School officials can restrict students' freedom of expression in cases of substantial disruption, violation of rules, destruction of property, or disregard for authority. And physical gestures that do not conform to the basics of decency may be regulated. So for us, this was pretty black and white. It seems that this is just an issue of affection. It's not really about, I know that the community and some people in the school are upset that it's two males, but as an administrator, it's inappropriate behavior, period. Mm-hmm. So it seemed pretty and simple.
It should have been dealt with up front before it got, again, this is a form of antecedent behaviors, should have been dealt with up front. They should, whether it's two boys or two girls or a boy and a girl, inappropriate display of affection is one of those gateways, one of those antecedent behaviors that leads to other things. And in this case, the school didn't want to deal with it up front. So they let Willie kiss and hold hands and display other sorts of affection. We shouldn't be letting any students do that.
Right.
So that was problem one. All right.
Jennifer, you want to do the next part? Unmute. You got to
Yeah.
unmute. There you go.
I could not get my computer to log on. I'm so sorry. All right, so where are we?
I can see you now.
All right, where are we? You're
Case
on.
study
Case study
question
questions.
Got it. Sorry.
4.
Okay. One, two, three. Yeah. Would you consider Mary Lou's comment a veiled threat? I guess the question that you have to consider is, how does attending the prom have the potential to be disruptive to the learning process? But I think the word in all of this that really stuck with me was the word agenda. They have an agenda. They're not just simply attending the prom. I don't know. What are Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law? To address and take action against inappropriate displays of affection for all students, like we just said. How should Mary Lou respond to the concerns? Definitely listen and validate their concerns, but validation does not mean agreeing with them. I listen to you doesn't mean I agree with you. It means you're giving them a safe space to express themselves. And I think that's important in trust building and relationship building. Should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend prom as a couple? I don't know. She should consider discrimination policy, both district and federal, but the couple type behaviors that you expect to see couples displaying, like we said earlier, nobody should be doing those.
Not at school.
Yeah, not at school, not at a prom event or a school related event. So any thoughts on that, anyone?
So in Wake County, the policy says, okay, for discrimination, the board prohibits all forms of unlawful discrimination for purposes of this policy. It means any act or failure to act that unreasonably or unfavorably differentiates treatment of others based solely on their membership in a socially distinct group or category, such as race, ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, pregnancy, religion, age, or disability. So in the Wake County handbook, that's what they say about discrimination. So I think that if she tells them they cannot go to prom, she is definitely going to be at risk of showing discrimination.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Anybody have a counterpoint to that? Anybody want to argue that they should be banned from the prom?
I sure wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be the one to do it. Because I know that would open up.
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
No,
That-
definitely not.
Not in today's day, not in society as it is today.
All right. I'm going to go down the list here for you. Now, what I'm going to provide for you is the legal perspective. It's not Dale's opinion. I had a response back last semester from students talking about Dale's highly opinionated and we feel intimidated. I'm not giving you my opinion. I'm telling you what the law is. All right. Under bullying laws that we have now adopted, Mary Lou's comments were a threat. They were bullying. All right. Under the clause of heckler's veto, who remembers what heckler's veto is? You can't say, because these people over here might act stupid, I'm going to punish you. Oh my. So the notion that if you come to prom, it may cause people might hurt you. So we're going to punish you by not letting you come to the prom. Oh no, what you read that in our law book. That's what's referred to as heckler's veto. That is illegal. That I'm afraid for your safety is a veiled threat. That means I'm not going to protect you. We're going to let these people have at you. It's your problem. We're going to blame the victim. You know, now it may not be the smartest thing to walk down a dark alley, but you don't blame the person who does that. If they get mugged, you blame the person who mugged them. Now, it might have been advisable, but you can't blame them, or you can't say because somebody else may break the law and do something stupid. I'm going to punish you rather than punish them if they do it. That's the whole notion of heckler's veto. And if you tell somebody that they may be harmed, what you're in effect saying is you're bullying them into doing what you want them to do. In effect, what you're saying is we're going to let them have at you if you come. I'd say that's more than a veiled threat. I'd say that's a direct threat. If you show up, you're going to get your behind kicked, and we're going to stand by and watch, and maybe even cheer them on. You can't do things like that. So make sure you go back and you recover heckler's veto. You can't blame the victim and punish them based on what other people might do. And you can't allude to the fact that you're not going to stop them from doing that or take action against them for doing that. All right, what are her responsibilities under the law? Well, she didn't do antecedent behaviors. I fault her for that to begin with. She let Jimmy and Willie get out of control in school, and that's what stirred up the community. They probably wouldn't have been nearly as stirred up if Jimmy and Willie hadn't been, in everybody's face with it. I mean, it bothers me if it's boys and girls. And I'll tell you why. And I'll say this, and you can say I'm an old man and that I'm, you can be mad at me for saying this, but boys are stupid. I was one a long time ago. And when I say that, I say that to say this. Boys, especially early adolescents, can't distinguish between boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. If they see a boy kissing a girl, they think they get a turn too. They're not smart enough at that age, or their sense of their maturity level or their sense of relationships at that age is not so developed that they can make that determination. If she let him kiss her, then she would let me too, is kind of the way early adolescent, and even some boys into later adolescence, and even some men never grow out of that. And you've heard all the old things about, that are derogatory to women, blaming women, when it's the idiocy of the males in the situation. But one of the reasons why in early adolescent schools, in middle schools, junior highs, you have to be real careful to caution everybody that if you can't just say, well, all these boys can hug me, but he can't. No boys need to be hugging you, because boys aren't smart enough to make that determination. If they saw you hug one guy, they think they get a turn too. And that's not Dale's opinion. That's one of those stages of development that early adolescent males just haven't moved into yet. And you have to know that about them. They can't make that determination yet. About the time they're in the 7th or 8th grade, they should be, if they develop normally, they should be able to understand personal relationships, that boy and that girl have a personal relationship that you don't have with that girl. But early adolescent boys especially don't get that. So you have to be careful of that. But in this case, you shouldn't have let a boy and a girl act this way, not in your school, because this is what leads to a lot of sexual infractions. I told you about the middle school where we had all the sexual infractions, and I and the criminologist went over and did an audit trying to figure out. I mean, it was on the news. I mean, I had to go. We were getting killed on the news in Charlotte. And I went over and looked, and it was easy to see why we had all these sexual infractions of crime and violence, sexual assault, sexual offense, rape. We had 6 rapes. I mean, I could see why this was happening. I mean, it was just a big love fest. There were no boundaries. There was no rules, and kids were just displaying inappropriate affection at every opportunity that they got. I mean, it was just the wild, wild west. But that's where it goes. That's where it leads. And so you've got to stop those antecedent behaviors. You've got to stop those inappropriate displays of affection. That's exactly right. Now, what about the parents who come in and want to talk about somebody else's children? What does FERPA say about that? I know Sarah knows FERPA. Sarah's muted. She's at the Panera Bread and Civilization.
You don't discuss other people's children, period.
Ever.
Nope.
Never.
Ever. Discipline, grades, ever. We never discuss somebody else's children, ever. Never, ever, ever, never. We don't talk about if we punished them, what the discipline was. We don't comment on their behavior. We don't talk about their records, their class rank, their grades. We never discuss anybody else's children with other parents, ever. So you can have these people in and they can blow it out and say whatever they want to. But you can't enter into a discussion with them about Jerry and Willie. That is not appropriate. So listen and validate. I don't know that I validate their concern. I just simply let them come in and blow it out and then thank them for their time. But I tell them right away, I'm not commenting on anything that has to do with these two children. They're not yours. I'm not brokering a meeting with you and their parents. If you want to do that, that's up to you. That's another form of violation of privacy. Don't be getting into brokering meetings with parents. That's also covered under FERPA as well. You give Jerry and Willie's parents the phone number of these people. They may put it on some website somewhere, and they get 1 million prank calls. You don't need to be brokering any meetings with these people.
So then, Dr. Lamb, would you say it's appropriate to begin the meeting with that statement that we are not here to discuss any other children?
That's correct.
Okay.
Talk about your children.
Right.
And you can express your concerns, but now we're not responding, That's why always when you see reports on TV and the school had no comment, that's why the school had no comment. That's why when you see them, something's happened to the school and they're talking to parents are in their cars because they're across the street. They're not allowed to come on campus and especially not to interview students or be involved with students, or parents will accost other kids. You can't do that.
Right.
You cannot do that. And you have to be careful, and I'll give you an extension of that may be extraneous. But along that same line, if you get a complaint from one staff member to the other, it's not a good idea to have them in and try to broker that meeting either. That's a bad idea as well, because you get into privacy concerns there, and also you get into some other things. And I'll tell you a story on that one as soon as I see what this question is.
So then you would meet each with the staff separately? Like meet with one staff member, then you would meet with the other?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's why I would do these parents. I mean, that it's the same theory here.
Got it.
If I wanted to talk to Jimmy and Willie's parents, I wouldn't talk to them together. I'd talk to Jimmy's parents and then Willie's parents, and then I'd talk to these other parents. But I would not broker a meeting to get them all together, and I definitely would not discuss anybody else's child except theirs. All right. So the question from April is, what about allowing them to host their awareness and fairness events? We'll get to that one probably after we do this one down here. That should be bullet number 5. We'll get to it in that kind of in this order. I'm kind of working through this stuff. So I was doing a reconciliation back before. I think I shared this with you. It's in the manual. Prior to 2014, the districts were responsible for reporting to the Office of Civil Rights all the acts of crime and violence. We had to do it to the state, and then we had to report to them. And so we had to do a reconciliation account. And then we put it all together in one collection system starting in 2014. So everything went in. No more third-party systems. We see until 2014, we allowed some third-party systems to collect different kinds of data. We don't allow those anymore. You notice that wasn't in the handbook anymore. And so we had to do a reconciliation. So after 2014, I'd been long gone by then and retired. It all went to one place. But back in the day when we had to do a reconciliation between the third-party systems and what was at that time NCWISE, which became PowerSchool, I came across a police report of an assault on staff. And that's one of the at that time, it was one of the counting offenses for persistently dangerous. And it was at a small elementary school, and it was going to put them over their total because they had a couple more things that had happened there. And I was like, holy crap. How'd that one get by me? That's a small school. We got 160 schools, but, you know, how'd this one get by me? I didn't see this. And I went back and checked. No, it hadn't been reported in any of the reporting functions for the school district. So called up, I went over and was able to get an audience with the person who claimed that she was assaulted. She was a teacher assistant at the elementary school. And so I made an appointment, went over to see her, and I said, you know, ma'am, you filed this. You didn't file it with, you know, there's no school resource officer stationed at your school. There's one at the local secondary school nearby, but you filed this with a magistrate. She said, yes. She said, I was not going to be intimidated, and I didn't know that anybody in school would take my report, any of the officers that work in school, so I went to a magistrate. So I said, could you tell me about this? She said, yes, I and the teacher that I work for were having some problems. And so the principal invited us to both come to his office to tell our sides of the story. And so the teacher went first and told what a terrible person I was and sorry that I should be fired and did all these things. And I sat there and I took it. And then when it came my turn, before I could even say anything, the teacher just jumped up and slapped me right out on the floor. Just knocked me right out of my seat. And I said, oh, my Lord. And I said, and what did the principal do? And I called him by name. He told me that if I told it, he'd fire me. Rest his soul, he died. The principal died while on suspension waiting to be terminated. But that's what he did. He should have never had them both in there to begin with. Nothing good was going to come out of that. Not only is it against the law for parents, nothing good's going to come out of it. It's only going to exacerbate the problem when you bring the combatants together like that. Now, I can't say that one parent's going to assault the other, but that's very likely to happen. Very likely that it's going to turn physical. It's going to be like the Jerry Springer show, waiting on the paternity test. It's very likely that that's what it's going to be. Nothing good can come out of that. You need to stay out of the meeting brokering business because you're going to step over the line either in law or in good judgment, one or the other. You can't know that the people that you invite are going to be civil and act like responsible adults in a public setting. I mean, I'm sure that principal didn't know that the teacher was going to slap the teacher assistant right out on the floor. But then, because he realized he'd made a mistake, he should have referred it to HR, and he definitely shouldn't have put them in the same room together and allowed one just to trash the other. He just threatened the teacher assistant not to tell it. So she was afraid to report it to school officials, so she went to a magistrate. So it doesn't end well, folks. I can tell you, don't get into the brokering business, period. From the legal standpoint or from the common sense standpoint, don't get involved in brokering. That's not your job. So, and then let's move to, as Karen pointed out, you can't ban them from the prom based on their orientation. Just because they're gay, you can't tell them not to come to the prom. Gay kids have been coming to prom forever. people have this notion that people just turned gay in the last 4 or 5 years. It's just amazing to me. I'm somewhat of a rock music, especially classic rock aficionado. And I can't tell you the number of songs from the early 70s about gay people. David Bowie made, the whole Ziggy Stardust androgyny thing. Was he a man or is he a woman? He was transgender back in 1970. Mick Ronson was playing lead guitar on the Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars album with David Bowie. I mean, you had Lou Reed, you had the Kinks did Lola. Lou Reed did Take a Walk on the Wild Side about transvestites. I mean, people act like it's just happened, during the last presidential regime prior to the one we're in now, that all this just came to the forefront. I tell people all the time, I do not understand the bathroom deal. The bathroom deal was never about bathrooms. The bathroom deal was about letting Smithfield and some other big employers in North Carolina weasel out of their liability for the bad behavior of some of their people. That was on the back pages. It limited the liability, the corporate liability for that kind of for sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. That's what the bathroom bill was about. It wasn't about bathrooms. That was just the uninformed didn't read the thing. But I remember back when I was just a young man. I remember I came to Charlotte in 74. Didn't live far away, but came to Charlotte in 74 to see Santana and Eric Clapton at the old Park Road over where now is, it's not Park Road, but over where Memorial Stadium is. There was a music venue over there, and when they got through, they played the Double Door. But I remember there were a lot of gay people there then at that was in 74. I mean, the neighborhood theater's been around in Charlotte forever. But the biggest thing is the Pterodactyl Club was a gay club back in the 70s. You can still go to, used to be Mythos, now it's Cosmos Cafe downtown at 7th and College for the drag race on Saturday night to see all the drag queens. That's been a part of Charlotte for the last 50 years. And we act like gay people just popped up 2 or 3 years ago. And now all of a sudden it's become this big issue. We've had gay people forever. I told you when I was a high school principal, I had a transgender boy that wore dresses. I made him wear them long as the girls. That was the only reason I sent him home. He was wearing his dresses too short. But other than that, I mean, I don't understand why all of a sudden we've just lost our mind over this. You don't have to agree with it, but it's not something that just happened the last few minutes. There's laws in place as well. Politicians have the license to get on TV and print media and other electronic media and jump up and down and yell and scream. But as public officials, as people who were not elected, as people who were hired as professional staff to carry out laws and policies, you can't have your own agenda. You can think whatever you want to think, but you can't have your own agenda. You can't ban Willie and Jerry from coming to the prom. That would be discrimination. Whether you agree that, with their lifestyle, that's not what you're doing. Your job is to follow through on the laws and policies that are set forth by the state of North or South Carolina and the handbook, the board policy handbook of the state of the district that you're in, or in Kelly's case, New Jersey. And you can't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or sexual preference. You can't just ban them from the prom because they're gay. You don't have to like it, but that's the rules. And you don't get to argue your case in the court. I told you the principal in the neighboring district that banned some kids from wearing T-shirts. He didn't like the slogan. Then went to the newspaper arguing his case. Well, they retired him right quick. You can't be talking about those kids and what you did. And your job is to follow the board policy. Board policy did not prohibit them from wearing those T-shirts. He just didn't like them. He didn't like the political affiliation of the T-shirts, and so he banned the kids from in the T-shirt. You can't do that. Your job is not to make policy, but to carry it out. You don't get to go on TV like politicians do and act a fool, regardless of what the law is. You don't have the protections that they have. You have to follow through and do the right thing. So no, you can't discriminate against them. You do have to let them come to the prom. Now, what was the last question that was asked that I said would be the one I'd address when I got to this one? Reiterate the question.
Question about allowing them to host their awareness and fairness events.
All right. You do have the legal authority to govern student publications and activities. And I said that for a reason. Publications and activities. You can ban articles from the student newspaper that are slanderous or that are derogatory or that you consider to be in bad taste or profane or pornographic. You can do that. You can limit activities of students if they do not follow the policy set forth by student clubs or groups. Now, if Jerry and Willie want to have some of their awareness activities at school, they would have to conform to the same rules and policies that any other social group would have to. And I suspect Willie and Jerry would not want to or be able to conform to those. And so you would more than likely deny them the right to do that unless they had a faculty sponsor. It would have to be an after school hours. It would have to be the same as if it were the Key Club wanting to do something. Now, you would not be doing assemblies and letting them do those kinds of things, because you wouldn't let the football team do an assembly and talk about their sport and do something like that. And so they would fall under the same policies and guidelines as any other student group. They would have to have a faculty sponsor, elected officers. They would have to have a charter of some sort as to what they were doing. Now, if they wanted to go to the district and petition them to sponsor such types of events as that, they're perfectly. You have a department in your central office that handles that kind of thing, and they're certainly free to petition them to bring those kind of activities to that building. But it would not be in Willie. They would fall under the same as student groups. And no, you would not of your own volition as a principal have the authority to schedule those kinds of things. All fundraisers, all programs, all field trips, all of those have to be approved up front before the school year starts. I'm hoping that y'all have done the field trip policy, that y'all have discovered that all that stuff has to be done up front. You can't just be having some group come in and, Snakes Alive has got to be approved before the school year starts. Now, there are still some counties that allow that to come in. I worked in one. It's been a while. I don't know if they still do or not. But 32 years ago, I was a principal in a school, but every year they booked Snakes Alive. The fellow brought snakes in, and all the kids passed the snakes around and handled them. Of course, they were pretty practiced from church, so it wasn't a big deal. I didn't see what was educational about that, but they thought that was the best thing. We had 100% attendance that day. Everybody came to see the snakes. I argued what is the value of this. Since I am not a native snake handler, I'm a different kind of Baptist, I guess, than some of them. But I didn't see the educational benefit in it. But in that school district, they thought that was just, you must have that. And the board had approved it. So it was an approved event. When I was in Morganton, which was supposed to be a little more modern, a few years later, you catch these chats. And so when I was there, we went down to the COMA, COMA, City of Morganton Auditorium. They built an auditorium in Morganton, and they called it the Comma. Can't make this up. Not an exceptionally witty group of people. And so we went down there and we took our schools. I was an elementary principal. I had an elementary and junior high on the same campus. So I took the elementary kids. I forget what grades it was. We had to take them down to the Comma for this program that the district had sponsored. And it was this group, musical group. And they did, their big hit, I believe, was Stranger Danger. I believe that was their big hit. And they wore tight pants, and they kind of affected a Kiss makeup look, and kind of jumped around and acted stupid. And you know, the elementary supervisor from the central office, I don't know, I hadn't seen him in 30 years, Wayne Honeycutt. I don't remember. I don't know whatever happened to him. He can't be too young a fellow if he's still around. But, you know, he was a nice and very conservative person. And I don't know how in the world he had gotten onto this group, but they were just completely inappropriate for young kids. And they just scared the crap out of them with the makeup and screaming and yelling around. They're supposed to be playing music. You know, about half the kids thought it was the best thing ever, and the other half were running for the exits. And it was just a disaster. So that was the last time we had the Stranger Danger bunch. But how that one slipped through, I mean, most places vet. My point is, you have some places that are a little weird in their taste, like the Snakes in Rutherford County. But most places vet any kind of programs. I'm not a big fan of these people who come in, who are these motivational speakers that have overcome something in their lives and makes them an expert now. I'm not a big fan of most of those stories. I'm not a fan of. I'm not sure that there's a lot of value in that for kids. I think sometimes they teach the wrong lessons. You know, you'll have these people come in, you know, I was doing this, rock and roll, I was doing drugs, you know, and indiscriminate sex, but I found the light, and all the kid hears is rock and roll and indiscriminate sex and drinking. I'm not sure that of the value of those messages. So this would be one of those that, you know, I don't ever like to kick the can down the road, but this is one of those times that you would direct Jimmy and Willie to the appropriate person in the central office and say, have at it. If they want to get involved in these kinds of things, we'll certainly, whatever the district wants to do, but that's not a school level decision, is my point. That's not something that you would entertain or that you would promise or that you would even imply that could be done. That is not a school level decision, those kinds of programs. And their club activity would have to form a regular club. And if they did, they'd have the same rights as any other club. And so that kind of does that. All right. Our other presentation, you got anything? I saw one of the presentations that came in today.
I think I shared ours with you.
Okay, let me see. I saw another one today.
Or Shelly may have shared it with you too. It would have been tonight that we shared it.
I actually don't think I did share it with him.
I shared it earlier, but it's not showing up on his. I don't see it.
Oh.
There, case study group 2. Yeah, right there.
It's there.
There it is.
Here we go.
I don't think I originally shared it with him. That's it.
Yep, that's
All
ours.
right.
I mean, we really had some of the same things that the other group had. Our recap was very similar. You're obviously wrong on the veiled threat based on what you've shared tonight.
Well, again, under the standard, go back and read the standard of heckler's veto.
Yep, I made note of that.
In our law book.
I did.
Go back and read that standard. That's why that's where that veiled threat. That's why I asked that. That's so that you will go back and make sure you understand heckler's veto.
Does anybody else want to cover anything else on there or take over at this point, or? No. If you go to her responsibilities, we actually said what you just said about like going down the hill of making superiors aware of the situation. This would be one of those situations where you would turn that over to them.
Yeah. If they want to make it, if they want to, I mean, a lot of high schools around the country have the Gay Straight Lesbian Alliance as a student club. You're allowed to do that as long as you get a faculty sponsor and have a club. Now, you can't just have a bunch of kids walking around talking about being gay to classes. I mean, you can't do that. Of course, you can't do that. You can't have just walking around talking about any random thing. All programs have to be improved, and if they want to do a club, that has to be approved, and they have rules as well, where they don't impose on people who don't want to be in their club. You don't make students sit through what, do their things. And so the program is a no. The club is, if you follow the rules of forming a club, it's a yes. And so,
well, what the other group said about understanding the school policy on affection first, like that needed to be addressed before anything else.
Yeah.
But that she had, if she allowed one thing, both sides had to be allowed, so that had to be taken into consideration. If you keep scrolling down. Sorry, there's trucks going by. We had said as well that she had to address with the parents that both sides were, like their disruption was unlawful as well. And their
but be careful. Don't talk about Jimmy and Willie and what they did is lawful or unlawful. That's not something that you can talk with anybody else's parents about their kids.
And then we said that she had to allow them to go to the prom as a couple.
Yeah. And they had to provide them a safe environment as well, equal protection under the law. Good point there. That's what I was talking about. You can't say, if you come, they're going to beat the stuffing out of you, because what you've implied is that's an implied threat. But you're going to let them. You're not going to protect them because of who they are. You're not going to protect them. And that goes back again to Heckler's veto, in that you might do something illegal, immoral, or wrong, so we're going to punish you, rather than if they do that and telling them no and preventing it, or if they do, we're going to punish them. Oh my goodness. That falls under the category, and this, if you're offended, I apologize for. This falls under that notion that women are to blame, or we're asking for it if they dress too provocative. That's the same exact function, theory, analogy. It's exactly what we're talking about here. If a woman wears whatever out in public and men act inappropriately to her, it's her fault for her having dressed that way. It's that level of thinking. That's what Heckler's veto. That's part of that as well, that we're trying to get folks to understand, that you can't blame the victim here. It's your job to provide equal protection, equal access, equal protection. That's your job. Now, if you want to become a politician, get elected, and argue some other point all you want to, but your job as a public school administrator is to uphold the laws and policies of the state and district that you're working in, period. You don't get to pick and choose the ones you like and don't like. I had a student last semester from a far western county, and none of this made any sense to her because they were gay. Everything about that was wrong. Because they were gay, all the rules go out the window for them. I hate that. I hate that she feels that way or thinks that way, because folks like that, sometimes bad things happen in their lives to them, or what if that was your child? what, not just gay, something that discriminate against your child, or those things have a way of boomeranging back on you. I'm afraid sometimes. I hope it doesn't. For her sake, I really hope it doesn't. But, I'm bothered that somebody would think that in this day and age that they can't tell TV from reality. On TV, politicians can get on TV and act a fool and do reality. TV is not real, folks. It is contrived. But these people, a lot of what they do on TV, even politicians, it's just bluff and bluster. It's not real. And there's a certain amount of license that they're allowed to take that administrators are not. You have to follow the law. And you should follow the law because you're there to protect every child. Even Jerry and Willie, even if you don't agree with Jerry and Willie, you're still there to protect them. What about, if we don't protect Jerry and Willie, see, I always go back to, what if we don't protect Jerry and Willie? What's the next group that we won't protect? That we don't like? I saw this week where they finally removed a Florida high school principal who would not allow activities around that were approved by the district around the Holocaust for the Holocaust remembrance this month, because he said that the Holocaust was just a belief and everybody didn't believe it, that it's just people's opinion, that it's not actually factual that the Holocaust happened. See, that's the risk that you run. How far do you go? Don't let Jerry and Willie go. What about me? I'm bald-headed, big, ugly, heavy. What, you going to discriminate against old people now? It once it starts, it's hard to get stopped. That's not my opinion. That's human nature. So,
Dr. Lamb, I have a question.
yes.
Do you just think in your years in the field, especially given your time as a principal and everything, that dealing with these things has gotten worse because of social media and things of that sort? So, are some of these old school type principals, have they been allowed to get away with this kind of discriminatory behavior, and now they're having to conform to fairness?
And they're getting fired right and left.
Right.
And they're getting put out to pasture right and left because they've been able to do this stuff, darkness, and they got away with it, could set policy and argue policy like they were politicians rather than administrators. But those days are over, is what I'm telling you. There are no secrets anymore. That's one good thing about social media. I'm not a social media fan, but that's one good thing about social media is it exposes a lot of this stuff that's been wrong for a long period. It was always wrong. See, that's the thing about it. It was wrong always. If you don't have anything else to do this week, I know this probably is a little extraneous, but if you don't have anything else to do, let me see if I can find it for you. I got some light reading for you. You ought to read this book. I think it's one of the most profound things that I ever read. I read it when I was a young man. I don't know why. The book, Why We Can't Wait. And this book now is 55 years old. What I'm telling you is this stuff isn't new. A lot of the music of the late 60s and early 70s and a lot of the culture and lifestyle was much more flamboyant and gender fluid than it is now. Again, social media backlash, but again, people doing the wrong thing have been doing the wrong thing. A lot of old school principles for a long time. So social media has exposed them, but this stuff isn't new. But if you don't have anything, this is not a real long book. and then it basically tells why things for segregation started. But it argued for desegregation, equal rights, and those kinds of things. And it made some arguments. What I'm saying is the argument, some of these issues have been around for a long time. They've just now come to the forefront because of social media. Martin Luther King made a lot of the arguments that we make for gay and lesbian people. He made them 55 years ago. These are not new arguments. We act like because we saw it on social media that this is something new or different. It's been around a long time. It's just come to the forefront. But the good thing is if you do some of these bad and stupid things now, you kind of get called out. It becomes known on social media, and that's a good thing. And so that part of it I do like. But if you don't have, it's not a very long book, but so it's a very good book to read, but it gives you some perspective that these are not new issues, that we act as if this has all just popped up in the last few minutes. We've been struggling with some of these things for a very long time. It also some insight into the notion if we just ignore it or say it didn't happen or minimalize it, that the facts don't matter. And so the point is administrators have to deal with what is. You're not about making policy. You deal with the laws of the land, the policies of your district. You deal with those, and you discharge those to the best of your ability, regardless of your personal feelings. You don't let that enter in. If you're a professional, you do your job, and you protect all students, and you do the right thing legally and ethically every time out. That's the notion. The notion of this case is you do the right thing every time out. Know the FERPA laws. Know what you can and can't talk about. Make sure that you know those, but that you do the right thing every time, whether it's popular or unpopular, immaterial. If you have to take a whipping, you just have to take the whipping. And so I'm going to leave you with one tonight. In the principal's in-basket activity in the interviewing materials, one of the emails that you have to sort through for a reasoning activity, you get an email from a reporter, your new administrator in the building like Sarah is, and they want to come over and talk with you and maybe interview some teachers and kids and those kinds of things. And the answer would be no. And you would refer that email to the public information office of your school district. You don't talk to the press ever unless it's been vetted by your public information officer. You don't talk about people. You don't even talk about yourself. You especially don't let press come on campus and talk and interview students. A lot of these things in this case opens the door for all that kind of stuff, which is an invasion of privacy. We don't allow that. So a lot of this goes back to FERPA as well. And that's what they'll get you on. When they fire you, they'll get you for either discriminating. They probably won't fire you for discriminating against gay people because that might be controversial in your community. What they'll fire you for is a violation of FERPA laws. You talk to one parent about another parent's child. You allowed the news media to come. You allowed those kids a forum where they got up in front of other kids, and you didn't follow the district policy on privacy and information. The kids' script that they talked to other kids about was not vetted through the public information office of your school district. That's what they'll get you on. So just remember that if you do that. Questions you have for me on this case? This one I guess is kind of tough in terms of your personal feelings on things like this.
I have a question. One of the things about this makes me think of when I'm watching any kind of an athletic event, a soccer game, which I've watched a lot of this past month. you see a game getting out of control and you think to yourself, this referee needs to get control of this game.
Right.
I wonder how the principal could have gotten more control over this.
Well, that was what I started out with. First thing that I have a problem with is you let Jimmy and Willie sit together in the library and hold hands and kiss. In what universe did you think that was going to end well?
But it's like, how does the principal know that happened?
Oh, there was reports, and it was all. That's all anybody could talk about. It was all over the community.
Gotcha.
This was an ongoing thing. I mean, how'd the principal not know? Unless you were asleep or drunk, how'd you not know what was going on? Principals know everything's going on in their building. Good ones do.
Yeah.
The dean walked down here the other day and said, there's a problem between in this section with this coach. And I said, yeah, I'm already. And he said, well, how'd you know? I said, that's my job. I'm supposed to know everything. He said, but they didn't get in touch with you. Doesn't matter. I still know I know exactly. I've already got it handled. You know, or you're supposed to know. That's your job. That's why I rarely slept the 17 years I was a principal, because I wanted to handle it all, and I wanted to know. If I had two boys kissing in school, you better believe I'd know before my coffee got cold. I would know, because I wanted to know. Now, you could not know if you don't want to know. I mean, I've worked in and around principals who didn't want to know. And that was almost a joke among the faculty. You can tell anybody but him. He'd run from you. You couldn't tell him anything. I worked for the dean of what was that time assistant principal. His job was dean of men in a high school, dean of students. You could not make a disciplinary report to Mr. Norris. He would physically run out of the room. He wore those back in the day. He wore those checkered polyester suits, kind of like Ted Baxter wore on the Mary Tyler Moore show. He wasn't quite as stylish as Ted, but he wore them kind of suits. He had about 4 or 5. He had one like for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And he got, I don't know how many years he had them, but he was always afraid. He didn't want to get involved in anything because he might get something on one of his suits. So he didn't want to be involved in anywhere around students or anything nasty or, that kind of thing. And he had I guess he only had the 5 suits. But you could not make a report to him. He didn't want to know anything. He was like Schultz. I know nothing. Don't tell me anything. Y'all probably don't get that reference. Sergeant Schultz from old Hogan's Heroes show. I know nothing. Schultz didn't want to. I worked for a fellow. You couldn't tell him anything, but that was his choice. And then I've worked for other principals that knew everything, and that's what I wanted to know, everything that was going on. Now that didn't mean that I could do anything about it. But it wouldn't be because I hadn't thought about it or planned or figured or tried. So if you've got this kind of behavior going on in school, and everybody in the community knows it, and it's the hottest thing going on in school, and every kid in school is talking about it, and you didn't know anything about it as principal, that says more about you than it. I mean, that's a bigger issue than Jimmy and Willie. That's a bigger issue than them, that you didn't know that was happening in your building. And that you didn't do anything to stop it once it was going on, then you deserve the thrashing you got after that. You didn't do your job. You just hoped. I mean, her whole idea was hope. She just kept hoping it would go away. Just let the time run out. Hope's not a plan. And as I told Sam Baisden one time, a long time ago, when he was AP at Independence, I think Sam's in Stanley County now. Sam, how you end the school year is how you'll start the next year. It won't go away. There'll be a new Jimmy and Willie next year. That kid that's a pain in your butt that you're just ignoring and driving the teachers crazy and is turning the place out. He won't be here next year. He's graduating or he's going on to the next level. There'll be 2 in his place next year though, because you've now set the standard. I'll leave you with this. That's kind of the thought here is you set the standard. And all that's in question is is what is the cost? What are you going to have to pay in the long run? You ignore Jimmy and Willie this year, you'll have 4 Jimmy and Willies next year. What are you going to do then? Just hope that they don't show up. That's not a plan. You got to deal with the Jimmy and Willies of the world. It'll be some other problem that pops up. There's too many people who think that discipline is something that that you just have to deal with, but it's not your job, when it absolutely is your job. You have to deal with those things. They're instructional people, and you all are much better instructional people than I'm sure than I ever was. But, you know, that it's a fallacy that, oh, doing discipline, that's not what we're here for. I don't have time for that. I need to be involved with instruction. You better make time for things like this. You better know what's going on in your building. Even if you've got people who can handle it for you. I had 6 APs and 2 assistants when I was high school principal. But you better know what's going on, and you better be on top of it, or it'll get on top of you. Anything else for the good of the group? All right, so I see you in 2 weeks. Is that right? Y'all get the week off next week again? What y'all gonna do? Vacation? Sarah's already vacationing in sunny Ohio. Metropolis. All right, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Y'all be safe. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Stop share. End meeting for all.